What is the number one thing that employees talk about more than anything else? What is the number one thing that employees talk about with their staff, their peers, with their family when they go home at night, maybe with their kids, and maybe with friends? What's the number one thing that keeps employees awake at night? You. When we hire someone to be part of our organization, our farm, our business, our second family, if you will, when we hire someone, we impact a life. We bring somebody into our farm knowing that they're going to put a lot of hours into working. And the environment that we create for our employees, the way that we manage and the way that we lead, directly impacts an individual. When you think of somebody who has a lot of self-confidence, they're energized, they feel good, they're motivated, that is likely as a result of a positive work culture. So this title, it's kind of a very odd title, What Do Your Staff Think of You? Very strange, because we don't often reflect on that. We hire people, we have a business, we're worried about our pigs, our grain, our services. Whatever we're doing, we're very focused on that, but not often do we think about our impact on the individuals that we hire. What do your staff think about you? Does it really matter? When you think of the impact you have on people's lives, that should automatically suggest you should think twice about whether or not it matters. But there's also a business case in terms of just your profitability. When you think about recruiting, and we all know that recruiting is getting more and more difficult, that your culture, your reputation as a business leader and a great workplace is going to start playing a bigger role in your ability to recruit and retain. Social media is just starting in agriculture to play a significant role in employee recruiting and retention. There are websites now where employees can actually pontificate their experience working with you. And what do you want those people to say about you? Do you know that 85% of employees right now don't like where they work? 73% of employees say the major cause of stress in their lives is their boss. The number one reason why people quit is their boss. Now, this is generally where I get pushback. You kind of go, well, no, Michelle, I'm a good boss. People quit because they're going back to school, they got another job, it pays more flexibility. But when I call the people that quit and say, why did you quit? They say it was because of him or her. And they just won't tell you to your face that you were the reason they quit. So as a business owner, having high-performing people means that you've got a team of people that are motivated and want to work for you and your company. They're like that sports team. Imagine if you had a hockey team, football team, that were all aligned and really pumped about the team they were playing for. Imagine how that team would perform. So what your staff think about you really matters. Let me talk about Bob. So several years ago, in London actually, similar sort of conference, a gentleman came up to me afterwards and said, Michelle, I think we need your help. Have some employee issues, or I'm feeling something is off. And I wonder if you can help validate my feelings. So I went, it's a greenhouse, and I went and met with the staff. 23 staff. And I said to this client, his name was John, I said, John, the best way for us to understand is to really get the perspective, the perception of the employees. Let's see if they're feeling the same you are. So I spent 2 days, just hung with the staff, chatted with the staff, and it was evident there was consensus from all the staff of what was going on. So I fly back to Winnipeg. I'm going to prepare my report to give to John, and my phone rings. It's John. Michelle, you were there for 2 days. It's day 3. Do you know what's going on? I said, yeah, actually I do. I have, it's easy because there was consensus from all the staff. So that it makes our job easier to address the issue. What is it? Can you tell me what it is right now? It's Bob. Tell me more. I said, well, the staff said that Bob, who's the manager of the greenhouse, Bob is quite moody. And the staff would actually watch Bob drive in the morning to the greenhouse to see what kind of day it was going to be. The way he drove his half-ton truck told the staff if it was going to be a good day or a bad day. Bob was known to throw his cell phone to people if he got a little disappointed. Bob was very animated, very vocal in sharing displeasure in front of everybody. So the staff said they were intimidated by Bob. They didn't like working for Bob. And 85 or 82% of Bob's employees were actively looking for work. On a scale of 1 to 10, I asked these 22 staff, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being really happy, 1 being really unhappy, how happy are you working here? Over 90% gave the rating under 2, which just tells us 1. So I tell John this. So, the good news is an easy fix. We've got consistency. There's one core issue, root cause of your employee disengagement and dissatisfaction. Easy. Silence. Hello? John, you there? Absolute silence. Bob's my brother. Important information. Okay, I guess we can't fire Bob, so what are we going to do? John said, Michelle, this is information I think you should share with him yourself. So I prepare the report, and in the report I want to have a couple of graphics. Most of us read graphics easier than a lot of words, of the information. The graphic basically said, we don't like you as a boss, we don't want to work for you as a boss, and we really don't like working here. Bunch of circles with colors. So I'm meeting with Bob at his favorite restaurant to give him this presentation. As we're sitting there, Bob's anxious. We both have a glass of wine, and Bob says, so tell me about what you learned. So I give him the report with that graph. Grasp my glass of wine. Now imagine, you guys. Imagine if you got feedback from your staff that said how bad you were, how much they did not like working for you, how intimidating you are. Imagine what that would feel like. Bob sat there, pushed the report back, and said, garbage. You came at the wrong time. It was busy. Of course I'm passionate. This is my business. It's about quality. We're known for the best. My staff have to feel the same. And then Bob sat there, like I think we all would, and went, oh my. I did not realize that my behavior, the way that I drive my truck, impacted my staff. I had no idea. And Bob, with this little boy grin, said, is there a kindergarten class for leadership? Because I think I need to enroll. The best news is that Bob suddenly realized the impact that he has on people and his organizational culture and started to learn how to be a great leader. Every year I'd go back to do a bit of another check on Bob and his team. He only lost 2 in that year, and the rest of his team were with him for a long time. It's a great story for us to recognize the impact that we have. When we hire someone and they work for us, we are literally on a pedestal. How we say things, the words we use, are multiplied. And even though some of you will say, well, Michelle, I'm the kind of leader that gets my hands dirty. I want to be with them. I'm working with them all the time. That's the kind of leader I am. You're still the boss. And there's always going to be an element that they're going to be looking to you at or for because you are the boss. So what people think about you matters a lot. So Bob's issue was his perception versus reality was out of whack. Bob didn't realize that how he thought himself as a leader versus what his employees thought were completely different. Now, interesting, in all these ag conferences that I attend, and today even sitting in some of the sessions, we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to be better, with all of our pigs, and how to have better maintenance for them and environments for them and transition for them. What about for our people? What about stepping back once in a while and realizing that we also have to take care of our people in a very, very special way? Because it's going to get harder to recruit and harder to retain. And you play a big role in that. It's also really interesting in that our perception is often so different. So in this video, you see the happy face. This is often a leader who says, everything is going well. I have great culture, great people. My team is awesome. And if you look at this picture, that's not really the reality. How often are you able to really measure and understand what's going on with your people? What do people want? So that's a good question. So if we're talking about what matters, people want to feel involved, they want to feel appreciated, and they want to feel valued. Doesn't matter what type of position they have in an organization, people just want a sense of purpose. And it's amazing if you can give people that sense of purpose, how much better they'll be at performance, at communication, and at teamwork. There's another client, so I'm actually going there in a couple of days. They hired a woman that they found at a shelter. Rough life. Uneducated, poor English, just a rough life. She was hired to just sweep the floors. And every time I go there, she's one of my favorite people to see because she just shines now. She finds her job of sweeping the floors the most important thing in her life. And she just resonates, exudes this proudness. People want to feel appreciated. Tony's got a pepper farm. Trust me, I'm going to get tongue-tied. Tony's pepper farm was second generation. And Tony's farm was known for quality. And he had a team of employees for 5-6 years that he said were the best team that any business could have. He was very proud of them. And you'd go into Tony's greenhouse, and there was always lots of energy, high fives, and just a great place, the kind of environment that you want, right? You want people, again, to have fun, feel respected and valued, and working hard. And Tony says one day, something is happening, similar to the Bob story. Something's happening, Michelle. They're calling in sick. Got a couple guys that quit. I don't get it. When people call, you're starting to get the gist of this, and they complain or comment about the employees. The first person I look at is the boss. So I said, Tony, what's been going on? What have you changed or done differently or not done? Tony says, same, Michelle. We've been doing same. I just don't know what's going on. So I met with the pepper pickers. And as I sat with the pepper pickers, again, it was evident there was one root cause. There was something. But the pepper pickers were saying, about 6 months ago, Tony started to have these meetings. People were walking in, suits. The suits were walking in, and they were behind closed doors. And then Tony's gone a lot. Tony used to be here all the time with us. Tony's gone. When employees have a void of information, what happens? Rumors. I mean, our brain is made to, when there's voids, we think things. And typically they're negative. Tony's not around. Suits are coming to the office. There's closed-door meetings. Oh, one employee says, Tony's selling. Tony's selling. What do you think happens? The vortex, right? All the staff, oh my God, Tony's selling. Tony's selling. We've got to find another job. Tony's selling. I'm going to call in sick. I don't need to take care of quality anymore. Tony's selling. Tony wasn't selling. But that's what the staff thought. And that's what the staff felt. So their performance was immediately dropped because they didn't feel valued or appreciated anymore because they thought Tony was selling. When in fact, I shared this with Tony. Tony sat there and went, we sell our peppers. 80% of our crop goes to one grocery chain. That grocery chain came back to us and said they wanted us to change our packaging because their customer survey said they wanted their peppers packed differently. I did it. They wanted their peppers packed differently into smaller little boxes. The staff were demanded to change the way they were packaging without any explanation. And they got new equipment to accommodate the requests from the grocery chain. Tony didn't share that with the staff. They just made all these changes, had closed-door meetings, and the staff weren't involved. Staff want to understand. They want to feel involved. Now, that's not to say you need to involve your staff in big business decisions, but just get them to feel appreciated and involved. What staff thinks matters. If you want high-performing, engaged staff, they want to feel valued, appreciated, and part of. There's a lot of research now in terms of the psychology of our human behavior. And our whole human evolution continues to tell us that we want to be part of something. We want to be part of something. Make your organization that, where people feel part of something. Proud to be part of your industry. Proud to be working for you. So how do you go about doing this? That's the thing, right? How do you actually take the psychology of perception and how do you leave today with some tools to be a better leader or manager? First of all, come to the session at 3 o'clock. Other than that, how often do you actually do a checkup on yourself? I mean, if I was to go into any of your offices, chances are you have spreadsheets with data about a schwack of stuff, correct? How much data do you have about your leadership? How much data do you have about the culture in your organization? And we're obsessed with data on a whole bunch of stuff. Feed, health, space, profitability, and then even in our own health. I mean, people are buying Fitbits like crazy. How many steps are we taking every day? How many hours of sleep are we getting with REM? We're analyzing things like crazy. But why are we analyzing how we are doing as a leader or a manager of our teams? Whoa. And like Bob, sometimes we don't want to do that because the feedback we get might hurt. We don't want to be told we're not a good leader. We don't want to know that maybe we don't communicate very well or we're really not that motivating. So how do you do that? How do you actually get the feedback? Because the challenge is if you call an employee in and you have a chat, how am I doing as your manager, as your leader? What do you think they're going to tell you? They might share a little bit, but the truth is going to be sugar-coated for sure, because at the end of the day, you sign their paycheck. And when they go and have a beer with a friend later in the day, that's when the truth comes out. So how can you get feedback that would be like the feedback if you were listening to the guys or the group talking over a beer? How do you get that feedback? A couple of ways. Start to create a culture, an environment where people feel more comfortable giving you the truth. Third party, online surveys, team huddles, where you actually, maybe even if you only have 5 people in your organization, ask them to go off-site and talk about the things that you could do to be a better leader and for them to come back and talk to you about it. And start to create that environment where people feel more and more comfortable doing that. I'm curious, just show of hands, and again, at the next workshop, we'll get into this a bit more. How many of you have actually ever done something like a Leadership 360 or some sort of assessment of your leadership? All right, just a couple of you. Just curious, those of you that put your hands up, was it effective in terms of giving you feedback that was valuable? Yeah. We'll talk a little bit more about that at 3 o'clock. What people matter, or what people think matters. It matters because you're impacting people's lives. It matters because your culture drives performance and profitability. So if you're a business owner that's thinking about profitability, which we all do, the way your people work, recruiting people and retaining good people is all about you as a leader and as a manager. So think a little bit about culture. And I want to define culture, and I want to allow a lot of time for questions, so I'm going to kind of speed this up by about 5 minutes. Culture is the feel. It's sort of that aura in the air, if you will. And we all know culture. You can walk into an office, a building, a restaurant, and you can feel if it's stressful, if it's sort of lazy, you get the culture. And what's interesting is that leaders don't realize how much you drive the culture. On Saturday, I spent some time with a client and asked him how his culture was. And he said, the culture, Michelle, in the last 6 months has gotten a lot better. We've had a lot of changes, and the culture is really good. We're about change right now. I said, well, tell me how change as a culture motivates and engages your employees. He said, well, change is exciting, right? Because, change is about moving forward, and change is about the next steps, evolution. And I said, is this culture that you're describing consistent within your organization, small business? Absolutely, Michelle. I'm a really good leader at articulating and communicating with my staff. So what did I do next? I went and hung with the staff, and I asked them what the culture was. Not one person used the word change, evolution. Not one person was able to even actually put a word behind the culture other than not sure. So we need to understand the importance of culture because culture drives behavior. It's sort of if I was to, and I have to pick on you guys. Were you sleeping just now? Yeah? Was it a good one? Yeah? No REM? Okay. I had to pick on him. Let's just say this is one farm, and this is another farm. Your culture is very organized, very professional. The hiring process takes months, lots of interviews and testing. You have lots of reporting, and there's just lots of protocol, a lot of processes. Okay. Your organization, maybe fourth generation, more family, not really a lot of structure, but you guys work together as a really strong team. What's interesting in terms of those two cultures is that they're completely different. But I, as an employee, might thrive in that and die in that, or vice versa. So it's important for us, especially when we're recruiting and retaining high-performing employees, to understand what our culture is, because if I was in that environment and died versus flourishing, or vice versa, you need to understand that. Because your job as a leader is to create your culture, keep your culture alive, and bring people on board who thrive in your culture. It's like bringing a C hockey player into an A team. Or if you have too many B and C players, your A players are going to work less because that's the environment that they're in, right? So understand your culture. And I don't think many organizations, leaders know what their culture is. And I challenge you, one of the things to do after you leave this conference is to go back and say, what is my culture? What is it that's driving my people to feel proud and engaged? Because what people think of you matters. Also recognize that employees will perform a heck of a lot more. They won't call in sick. They're going to work harder. They'll be more accountable, pay more attention if they like who they're working for. So does that not make business sense? What people think about you matters. Create that culture and have people perform because they like working for you. And realize that your reputation, in terms of your culture and your leadership, is really important. And it's going to get more and more important in the next 5 years, minimum. Finding a good boss is really difficult. Leaving a good boss is difficult. Forgetting a good boss is impossible. So why do we not try to impact people's lives in a positive way and be awesome bosses with great cultures where people go home and feel valued and appreciated, and that their own presence with their family and friends is great because of the great working environment that you've created? Each and every one of you have something called a presence. We all have presence, and I'll call it an aura. Some people say I'm getting a little too fuzzy with the aura word, but we have an energy and a presence. And what is that presence that you are giving to your staff, and how are you making them feel? Time for questions. Let's go. Bring them on. Any online? Any?
Not seeing any online.
Oh, you guys are making my job too easy.
Anybody have some questions or our microphones?
All right, this is the first time ever. All right.
What's your feel on getting too close to your employees? An example of, we had one for years and years and years and years, became friends. She actually had her wedding on our yard, and eventually we knew we had to let her go. It only took our new barn manager to say, this person has to go. It gets really tough, but in the end, we did let her go, and it worked out fantastic. But what's your view on getting too close to them?
There's a lot of, I have lots of stories from other clients, but there's also some research in terms of that line between being a friend and a boss. And the word boss sometimes has a negative connotation in that, you're bossy and you're demanding. But let's just use that in context of today of being a leader or a manager. The evidence is that employees will be high performers for great leaders. They will be high performers for a friend for a while, because that friendship starts to delineate, if you will, the requirement for you to be a high performer. So there's a very fine line. You definitely want that connection of respect of that person and their family and their lifestyle. But I caution you, if you want to have a high performer for a long time, you might lose that if that person becomes a friend. And as your story is, when you have to start to let friends go, it can be complicated, especially in small communities. We understand how difficult that can be. Good question, thank you. In the session we're going to do later, I will speak a little bit about how to have those difficult conversations with employees who aren't performing. So when you start to have that, maybe you hired someone that's a bit of a superstar for a month or two, and suddenly their performance starts to wane, how to have that conversation. We will talk a little bit about that. And believe it or not, again, if you have the right culture and you're a good leader, having those conversations aren't that difficult anymore. It's kind of like that coach. You're on that team and you want to be a winning player, and your coach comes and tells you that you're playing poorly and tells you why. You actually respect that rather than get defensive. That's the kind of culture you want. Question? I wasn't sure if you were leaving or asking a question.
I'm still here.
Awesome.
Can a company have multiple cultures? You talked about Bob's culture and the boss's culture were two different things. What happens when there's multiple cultures? There's some employee that's taking the lead on something and has a certain mindset and somebody else has something different?
Another really good question, and a tough one to answer. The culture should be the driving force of the organization. It should be the way I behave in your culture or the way I behave sort of in your culture. So the culture technically should be one unified manner of behavior. This is the way our team plays in this league. In large organizations that maybe have branches across the country or across the world, that's where obviously cultures start to be different just based on location. If you have different cultures in your company, and it could be from the laborers to the management, that's where a clash in cultures is bad. That's where you want to bring it together to what is it that we as one group are trying to really achieve. And if you're struggling with culture, if you're trying to understand what I'm talking about and how you go back to your workplace and figure out what is my culture and what's the culture that I want, you can start with baby steps and say, well, what's one thing in 2019 that we want to achieve as a team? A new barn, a new process, some new trial of something, and use that little goal and create that into a team goal and get everybody aligned on that one goal, and you could start to build culture based on one goal. So you can start this process, this culture process, your leadership development growth, if you will, by taking some baby steps, and that's one way of doing it. If you have several cultures right now, I'd ask you to sort of take a look at which one is creating the highest engagement, the highest employee satisfaction, and maybe gravitate towards that one. Does that answer your question? Kind of? 3 o'clock, all right.
We do have one other question. How do you screen potential employees that will fit into your culture?
We're really bad at interviewing, aren't we? It's because we're not trained to interview, right? We're running barns and farms and businesses, and we're not trained to interview. And what's happening is the schools are teaching. Most schools now have a 40-hour curriculum on interview skills. So people are coming to you way more educated at interviewing. So it's no wonder that we interview, go, oh, I'm going to hire that person, and 2 days later go, what the heck did I just do? Because that person I interviewed is completely different than that person working in my farm right now. So to answer that question, interviewing has gotten a lot more complicated. There's interviewing skills now that most of us aren't aware of. There's something called behavior-based interviewing. There's psychological testing. There's a lot of those levels to help you have a better pick. But if I had one, rather than going through all those expenses and those hoops, one word of advice is spend a lot of time with that individual. People during an interview, when you ask them questions, will give you some really good answers. In fact, let me share this one quick story with you. It was an insurance company, and the insurance company wanted to hire a receptionist/secretary. So my question to the client was, well, what's your culture here? How would you describe? I need to know if it's going to be a fit for that versus that. And the client said, well, we've got 8 agents. She's going to be working for all agents, so it's going to be a little stressful and hectic. We're fast-paced. Perfect. So some of the questions I'm going to ask this candidate should be around fast-paced, numerous bosses. And this is a true story. Said to this young woman, so tell me about your most stressful day in the last 6 months. Because we wanted to understand how she handles stress. Oh my, it happened just like 2 weeks ago. It was such a bad day. Tell me about it. Well, the phone was ringing. There was somebody at the desk, and there was a courier waiting for a package that I couldn't find. And my boss was waiting for something. And she's starting to shake. So how did you handle this? Well, and then she went through the list of how she took care of all the stuff. And here's the tip. I said, well, tell me more. Then what happened? Michelle, I went to the bathroom and had a little cry. The cry really helped me. That's how I deal with stress. And I looked at her and thought, there is no chance that she'll survive in this environment. If we hadn't continued digging to understand how she really behaved. We would not have known that, and we probably would have hired her. She presented well. She was very pleasant, had lots of experience. But if we hadn't asked more questions, we wouldn't have really understood. So away from the interview, I also encourage you to take that person into your barn, into the fields, and have conversations that are more casual to get a better sense of that candidate. And based on the position, I even encourage you to go out for coffee or lunch or dinner and get a sense of that person away from the environment of an interview. That should give you a lot more information. So, hope that answered your questions. Again, we'll touch on that a little bit at 3.
Thank you, Michelle. And can we all thank Michelle?
Thank you.